Sierra Sidewinder is a spinning coaster at Knott's Berry Farm. It's one of the many family coasters in the park, but is it the best one? That's what we're going to be talking about in this video. Sierra Sidewinder is built by Mack Rides, and it originally opened in 2007. This spinning coaster is the headliner attraction of the kids area Camp Snoopy. In general, this is a fantastic kids area and one of the favorites of mine that I visited. It doesn't have crazy theming or anything, but it has some nice landscaping and plenty of other rides for kids to enjoy. But of course, the standout ride in this area is the ride we're talking about, Sierra Sidewinder. You may think that because this is a kids area, this would be a pretty tame ride, but honestly, that's not necessarily the case. This has some deceptively forceful maneuvers. To back my claim, I'll throw out that according to RCDB, at one of the maneuvers, you experience 3.3 G-forces, which is a lot for a kids ride. From what I've seen in my 2 visits to Knott's Berry Farm, this is the most popular ride in the area, and that makes sense. If you have fast lane, then you can easily skip this line, however. But I imagine, even on super busy days, the line probably doesn't exceed half an hour too often, but I could be wrong. Now, if there is one nice thing about Sierra Sidewinder, the trains for this coaster are comfortable, and most people can sit in them easily. From what I've seen, the operations for this coaster aren't amazing, but they aren't horrible either. Now, of course your ride experience varies a lot depending on where you sit. If you sit in the front, you're undoubtedly going to get a milder ride than if you sit in the back, and it also depends on how misplaced the weight is in your vehicle. If you want to go as tame as possible, balance the weight out best you can, and then sit in the front. If you want to make it as wild as possible, sit in the back and make the weight unbalanced. With this, you're pretty much guaranteed to get a different ride experience every time. And there's also the element of facing backwards or forwards to start the ride as well. The coaster starts off simple enough, a turn to the right before rising up 64 feet, leading into your drop of only 41 feet. The lift hill definitely isn't anything noteworthy, but that little twist section before the drop I think is kind of fun. It's a nice way to kind of ease you into the rest of the ride. After this helix, you do eventually wind your way to your first drop. Don't expect airtime here or anything, but it can be kind of fun if you take it sideways. You then rise up into your first turn, which isn't too noteworthy outside of the spinning that could be happening. But then you go into one of 2 really low helixes, and it feels like you're going to scrape your face on the ground. This is a pretty wild moment for a supposed kids coaster. I'm kind of surprised they put this element so low to the ground actually. I think it's pretty cool, but it could be a little scary for some kids. But anyways, you then rise up into a taller turn which doesn't have nearly as much speed in it. Then after another helix somewhat low to the ground, you hit the brake run. Now it may seem like this ride was over pretty quickly, and that's because, well, it was. This is not exactly a long coaster at all. That being said, I don't really think it's super short either. It feels like a good length when you're on the coaster. Now, I've heard complaints about this ride's smoothness in the past, and admittedly, it is not a butter smooth ride, but I don't really think its little shakiness is a problem either. It's just kind of there. To be honest though, personally, I don't really think it impacts the ride either in a positive or negative way. As I said, some of the elements are a little more intense than you would expect a coaster like this to be, and maybe the shakiness does add a little bit to that, but I don't think it adds a whole lot in that regard. The bottom line is that Sierra Sidewinder is a very fun family coaster, and if you can tolerate spinning, then you should have a good time. There aren't any true standout moments on this ride in my opinion, but because of the spinning factor, there aren't any true duds either. And because of that, with all the things I've said, I'm going to give this coaster a 7.5 out of 10. The goal with this one was to make a fun spinning coaster for all ages, and I think they did that very, very well. In my opinion, this is not one of the best rides at Knott's Berry Farm, but it is a very solid supporting coaster for them to have in their lineup. I would say this coaster definitely makes the park's lineup overall a lot better. Now, is it the best spinning coaster in California? I think you could easily make that argument. So to Knott's and to Mack Rides, solid job on this coaster. It's a good one.